Hi, it's Joy Gurus of the City of Wisdom. Today we answer the question, what is the number one reason that people retire broke? Now, if you've already been watching this channel, you know that 64% of Americans retire broke every single day, which is about less than $5,000 in their retirement accounts. You also know that upwards of 70% of people live paycheck to paycheck. Now, on the other end, we also know that 65% of self-made millionaires have at least three streams of income. So there are a couple things that we learn from these ratios, which I believe increases our probability of success or failure. The way that we could look at it is, if I spend more time doing the things that self-made millionaires do, shouldn't I get the results that they get? And I would sit back and say, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then the opposite would also be true. If I spend a bunch of my time not doing things that self-made millionaires do, does that mean that I won't get the results that they get? And I would say yes as well. So the question becomes, what do people who live paycheck to paycheck do? And what do the people who have become self-made millionaires do? To me, that is the linchpin. That is the idea of wisdom. Wisdom is this insight that I have through my experience or through other people's experiences. It's why the majority of people who are in the military, I think the Pentagon did a study and it said 80% of people who are in the military have a family member who's in the military. It's why when I meet people who are doctors, they normally had someone in their family as a doctor, or judges, they had someone in their family that was a lawyer. There is usually some insight that we gain through our life experiences, which means if you want to increase the likelihood of success in your retirement, then that means you would need to interact and be around people who have a successful, wealthy retirement. That if 70% of people live in paycheck to paycheck, if we're doing what they're doing, then that is decreasing my chance of becoming wealthy and having a wonderful, fabulous retirement. Before I tell you what the number one reason that people retire broke is, let me give you 8 examples that maybe you can then figure it out. So if you figure it out before I tell you, go ahead and put it in the comments. Tell me what you figured the number one reason that people retire broke is, and I'll give you the 8 examples. So the number one is you would have low or no contribution. So for most people, they're usually contributing little to no money towards their actual retirement, their actual financial freedom fund. I often tell people, knowing little to nothing about you, if you work somewhere that has a 401k or 403b, if they give you any sort of a match, you should take advantage of that match because that is free money. You just get it anyway, so you might as well invest in that. And you can invest up to the match, but that shouldn't be all of your investment. And what that means is if you're trying to replace your active income, which most of us are, we want to be able to separate our time and our money where we can spend time sleeping and we still make more money. And I joke with my wife and I tell her my plan is to make more money in my sleep than she can spend when she's awake. And she can spend a lot when she's awake. So this plan has to be financially sound if there's ever been a financially sound plan. But I know that a part of that requires me to have more than 2, 3, 5% of my salary. Now, I think we should all start wherever we're at. The reality is the majority of us need to get to a place where we can save 20 to 30% of our money. However long it takes, that's where the goal is. That's what we want to work up towards. Because the only way that I can replace 100% of my salary is I probably have to put 10, 20, 30% of my salary away each year and then allow the compounding interest of my investments to give me the return. The mistake that many of us make is because we're only investing 1 to 5% of our salary, it takes us a while to get to a place where 100% of our investments is funding our lifestyle. I believe that society is constructed in a way that it wants us to be lifelong employees. It does not want us to have financial freedom because we won't put up with a lot of the foolishness that we deal with on a regular basis. And so how does it do that? Well, on one end of it, it controls our wages. Our wages don't go up very quickly. You'll see that the wages go up like 1%, 2%, like 3% at tops, like nothing crazy. The wages are pretty stagnant. But then you look at the cost of different things. Food goes up much higher than our wages. Housing goes up much higher than our wages. College goes up much higher than our wages. Oil and energy, all of these things goes up much higher than our wages. As a result, there's a couple of things. One is you may need to have income that's tied to something that does go up higher than our wages. And so whether that's real estate or a business or the stock market, those go up higher than our wages. So that should be places we put our money. But in the other end of it, if our only income is earned income, that means that we are normally losing money every single year, right? If our wage stays the same, but all of our cost goes up, we have less purchasing power. That's the whole point of money is what can I buy with my money? Because I don't want the money just to swim in it like Scrooge McDuck. There are things that I want to accomplish. I have dreams that I want to be able to fund. Number two is a lack of financial planning. The awareness that we have and the insights and our understanding is based off of the life that we've lived so far. So we can have the trial and error approach where I do things and it doesn't work and then I make changes. or we could put together a more comprehensive plan that prepares us for a lot of these different situations where you and I haven't been 65 yet, or maybe you have and I haven't been 65 yet. But I do know that 70% of people who are 65 or older have at least one long term care episode. And I know that on average, that means that they would need to have about somewhere between thirty to $50,000 set aside for each year of care. And whether you have a home health aide come to your house, whether you're put in an assisted living facility, or whether you're put in a nursing home, that I know that it's about thirty to $50,000 on average. And so for most people, that means you need to have somewhere between 100 to $150,000 set aside to deal with long-term care, or you have to look and invest in long-term care insurance. The optimal time to get long-term care insurance, most people would say somewhere between like 45 to early 50s is a really good spot. Now, some people will get it earlier, some people will try to get it later, but it's harder to get approved the later we are. And then once you're over 60, because they know the numbers just like I do and just like you do now, that means that it significantly increases the likelihood that you're going to be using the long-term care insurance within a few years of retirement. And as a result, most insurance companies don't like that risk. So they're going to charge you a significant amount more so that it still makes sense for them to offer it to you. So usually it's about 45 to maybe 52, 53, 55, usually the upper end. Most people should make the decision how they want to deal with that possible situation. But if you don't have a comprehensive financial plan in place, you may be overlooking that aspect of your retirement plan. You also have things like taxes. How is my income being taxed in retirement? Am I prepared for that? These are all things that you want to have in a comprehensive retirement plan that will be beneficial to you versus where the majority of us are like, all right, I'm just going to try to get a bag of money. And if I have the bag of money, then I should be okay, right? Well, maybe it really depends. It depends on so many other factors. And that's why it makes sense to have a comprehensive view of your plan to see how all these little pieces are working together and whether we're able to accomplish the goals that we have for ourselves. Number three is an over reliance on Social Security. There's a couple things that people overlook in Social Security. Number one is that Social Security is taxed, and it's taxed kind of high, where they could tax upwards of 90% of our Social Security, which I know sounds crazy to say it out loud, but you don't have to make much. It's really close to the poverty line. I believe last time I saw it was somewhere like $25,000 for an individual. You can have about 50% of your Social Security tax. I think it was like 32,000 for a couple. You'd have half your Social Security tax, and then it would be somewhere around like 30. You'd get like 90% of the tax, and then if you had like 40 or 45,000, you can have 90% of the couple's tax. So you don't need a lot of annual income to have your Social Security significantly taxed. And a lot of people overlook that. And because of that, they end up over relying on Social Security. On average, it's only about $1,700 of what the Social Security office gives out. It could be as high as 3,000, it could be as low as less, hundreds of dollars a month. But on average, it's about $1,700 a month is what it is. And based off of that, it ends up leaving people with this gap in their retirement funds and lifestyle. Number four on our list is unforeseen events. So I just gave you an example of one a little bit earlier where we talked about long-term care. If you found out that long-term care is going to cost you $30,000 in a year, could your retirement plan afford to pay that expense out? And if it did, how many years would it take off of your retirement plan? Where you have the money that's set in place to where it could have worked. You would have been funded your entire retirement, rainbows and skittles, life was great, but then something happened. It was something we didn't expect. The two most common types of unforeseen expenses is your medical expenses, where you just didn't have the money to pay for these healthcare things that we've been talking about. But two is maybe you lose your job a little earlier than you thought. You said, I'm going to work another 5 years, I'm going to work another 10 years, I'm going to pay off all this debt, I'm going to get the house free and clear, where I'm going to have this money that we're going to be able to invest, and we're really going to ramp up our investments in our retirement accounts. And then we're going to be able to stack all this money the last 3, 4, 5 years of my working career. But then they lay you off in the middle of that. So now you have no job and no income, and you still have the debt. That happens to us more oftentimes than we want to, where companies will lay off the people who make more, and then they'll hire someone on the lower end who doesn't have the experience, who doesn't have the wisdom or the insight, who's going to make a bunch of mistakes, but the company pays them half of what they paid you. Number five is a mismanagement of investment. So there's really two things that could have happened. One is we lack diversification, which I agree with the overall mindset. Diversification is a tool for people who don't know what they're doing. And it's true. Diversification protects us against the unknown, where I vetted the stock out. I felt really good about it. I looked through the financials, but they lied on the financials. They did funny accounting on their financials. And as a result, the company didn't do that well. Or you invested in the company and an industry and it was on top of the world. And then artificial intelligence came out to everybody and it completely changed everything to where it made new winners and it took away old winners and made them losers. That is what we're talking about. Diversification is just protection against the unknown. Now, if you're someone who is very confident and you understand an industry or a company and you want to invest in one, two, three companies, if that is your risk tolerance, then you can do that. And it is true that the most successful people, that's what they do. If you read about Ashton Kutcher or Magic Johnson or Gary Vaynerchuk and all these different investors, Mark Cuban, if you watch Shark Tank, all of them, they invested in a handful of very specific companies in the early going, and they were able to 10x, 100x, 1000x their return because they put a lot of money, they bought a decent sized share in a select number of companies. It is true that if you pick winners, you're going to make much more than being diversified. The problem is if we mismanage our investments, we also can lose everything, which equally happens. There's numbers out there that talks about how awful the venture capital investments were over the last year because of that Shark Tank kind of boom where everybody's like, "Oh, I'm going to find these companies and this idea and I'm going to give them the money and it's going to be the best thing ever." For every Twitter and Facebook, there's 5, 10, 20 social media companies that you and I have never heard of because it didn't work. I mean, look at Threads. That was supposed to be the Twitter killer and it came out, it had a lot of money behind it. And do I think it's going to ultimately surpass Twitter or X as it's called today? I don't know. But what I do know is it's more likely that it's not going to replace it. Now, of course, all things are possible. But if you were going all in on that, how do you feel today? Do you feel as good about that? It'll be equally true when people are investing in crypto or Bitcoin or AI in the metaverse. There are so many things that we hear about, and it's the next big thing. And we are saying, oh, I got to invest in that. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Sometimes we're just gambling. Why do you like the metaverse? Was it because you saw something on TV that said everybody's going to have these glasses? Well, even if that's true, how do we choose the winning company? And that's where a lot of people mess up when it comes to the mismanagement of their investments. There's usually two or three things that we're missing. The first part is we have to choose the individual company. Sure, I feel good about this idea. And if you've ever watched Shark Tank, it's like one of my favorite questions is the person will say, this is a $1 billion industry. This is a $1 trillion industry. There's so much money in this industry. And if I just get 1% of that, then we would have so much money. And then the sharks would say, okay, how are you going to get the 1% of that? And they don't have a good plan. They don't have a good plan. They have the idea, which is, yes, this is a growing industry. There's a lot of money in this industry and someone's got to get the money. But why is that company getting the money? Why is that company I'm investing in getting the money? And what could cause the projections in the industry to change overnight? A lot of times we don't spend a lot of time being very creative and using our imagination on what could change because everything doesn't stay the same. The reality is most things are always changing. And that's where a lot of us make those bad investment decisions is we're making decisions with previous data, which obviously is the only data we have, but we're not thinking even a little bit about the way things may change in the future. Number 6 on our list is longevity risk. It just means that we live too long. We have this understanding. We said the average person lives to like 78 years old, and then you made a plan that was to 80 years old, and you felt really good about that. But then there's some technological advancement that now changes it to where everybody lives to 115. How does that impact your retirement plan? For most of us, that would ruin our retirement plan because we weren't planning on living an additional 3 decades. But if that was to happen, you may want to have some plan in place. There was not too long ago that the average person lived to 50 years old, and then it went up to 60 years old, and then it was 70 years old, and now it's at 78. Now, there's a couple things that we do know that have stayed the same, right? Women generally live longer than men. We know that industrialized, developed countries, they generally live longer than countries that aren't industrialized and developed yet. And that normally, if you have access to certain healthcare, then it has a positive impact on your life expectancy. But if some of these advancements in technology that have continued to happen over these years, if someone is able to create something that drastically increases the likelihood of us living longer, then that may impact our overall ability to stay retired. Number 7 is debt accumulation. We just carry too much debt into retirement. Most people I talk to, we all have the same plan. I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to invest my money. I'm going to retire and life is going to be great. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to do things with my family that I love and I get to control my time and I get to decide what I want to do. And I'm so excited about being able to do that. That's something that I enjoy about the thought of retirement. That's something I enjoy about just the thought of life. And if that's something that you think about when it comes to your retirement, then you want to put a plan in place that turns your dream into a reality. Because if you have the dream, but you don't have a plan to accomplish it, then it's just a wish, right? It's like, hey, I really hope that this happens. But we have to be intentional with our time and our money. And so you want to have a plan that allows you to do both. For people that aren't, they end up normally income creeping. And that's a very fancy way of saying as you make more money, you spend more money. That you have a smaller house, and then if your salary doubles, you get a bigger house. Where you see these people who get drafted professional athletes where they have Lamborghinis and Porsches and fancy cars and mansions and all this other stuff. Most of us do that. Not on the same scale, but most of us do that. If I have more money in my bank account, I feel like I need to spend it. Now that's something God has blessed me with where that's not a problem that I have. I generally don't spend money. Now my wife will tell you that I'm on the other extreme of it. So I have gift cards that people have got me that I just haven't spent. I'm just not generally someone that spends money. Now luckily I married her and she is on the other end. She's great at spending money and she does a great job of it. So I think we ultimately balance each other out. So that is something that we try to be thoughtful of. We keep track of what we're spending and we see in what categories we're spending it. As our income increases, we often will try to maintain whatever the dollar amount that we set the original percentages. If you say, I'm going to spend 20% of my money on food, well, no matter what your salary is, you're always going to spend 20% of your money on food, which is going to be the income creeping. But if you say, all right, this is what my salary is today, I'm going to spend 20% on food, this is what that dollar amount is, and that's how much I'm going to spend on food. Well, now everything that you get after that, anytime you get a raise or a bonus or anything else, you can then put that money towards your investments and your retirement, building your wealthy retirement funds. And the eighth and final hint of why the majority of people retire broke is inflation. Inflation is a very fancy way of saying that I have a certain amount of money and I can buy a certain amount of stuff. And as the price of these items goes up, if my income doesn't go up with that, then I cannot buy the same stuff I had anymore. It's this idea that the things that I used to be able to buy for $5, $10, $20 now cost me $15, $20. And because the cost went up, maybe I can still buy it, but maybe I have to adjust my retirement spending to where I can no longer afford that anymore. And so my dad used to talk about when he was a kid, he said he would walk to the corner store and he said for a nickel, he could buy a pack of cookies and a soda. Now, it's never been that cheap, ever in my whole life. I don't know if I could buy anything with a nickel ever. But I do know that when I was a kid, there used to be a sale on the little candy bars at the checkout. And there used to be, once a month, they would say four for $1. So each of the candy bars was like 25 cents. And then as I got older, the sale was three for $1. Each of the candy bars was 33 cents. And then as I got older, it was like two for $1, right? So each of the candy bars was 50 cents. And now you'll see the individual candy bars as close to $1. Well, that's what inflation is. It's the cost of things that you always bought goes up as you stay retired. The rule of 17 says that on average, if you have inflation of 3%, then it's about every 17 and a half, close to 20 years, the cost doubles. And what that means is if you were able to live off of $50,000 a year right now in 2023, that in 2040, you would need $100,000 to live the exact same lifestyle that you have today. And if you only had the same $50,000 today, and you have that in 2040, you actually have cut your lifestyle and spending in half. As the price of things have steadily gone up, you bought less gas, you bought different food, you made adjustments in your lifestyle. All right, so I've gone over all 8 hints. What do you think is the number one reason that people retire broke based off of what we discussed? Well, the number one reason that people retire broke is they have an inadequate amount of retirement savings. Or what we really could say is they don't have enough income being generated from their savings. So whether you don't have enough savings or whether you have too many investments in the wrong places, however the pie looks, the reality is you don't have enough retirement income coming in based off the investment and the strategies that you currently have in place. If you have the income necessary, then you can live the lifestyle in all 8 of these problems that keeps people from having a wealthy retirement. You've solved all of them. But if you don't solve the income problem, any one of these 8 things could cause you to retire broke. I just want to thank you for watching the video. I do always appreciate your time. If you find value in it, please like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insight on how to close the savings gap through wealthy retirement planning. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.